science fiction. We make no guarantees, however, how long it will remain fiction. Fiction. Fiction.
Cerebral greetings, cognonauts. I'm Ayla, and this is Exofathom. Tonight is going to be kind of an interesting one. We're going to talk about the brain, the mind, consciousness, self, thoughts, thinking, feeling, experiencing. I'm going to get into it all tonight because this is the show where we get weird. But let me introduce my co-hosts, Nick and Mike. How are you guys doing tonight?
Hey, all right. Happy Monday. And you missed a perfect opportunity to say cerebral salutations, but that's okay.
You know, I thought cerebral salutations, and I was like, oh, but the letters are mixed matched. And then
That's
I went
okay.
with a different greeting that was mixed matched. So, like, yeah, I don't know what's up with my brain today. Manic Monday. Mike, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Hanging in there.
Hanging in there as always.
How are you doing?
Never better. Bold-faced lie.
Host always asks how everybody is. Nobody asks how host is.
So yeah, sad. Nobody asks the host. Did you just break a rule? I guess it's 2022. We're mixing it up, ladies and gentlefolk. Yeah. Yeah. All right, well, let's dive in because this is a topic that, like, I don't even know how we should have titled this. Like, Nick asked me, what's the title for tonight? I was like, I don't know, man. We'll find out by the end, and then maybe we can go back and retitle it.
I do like the original or the title on the Google Docs, but it might break copyright laws.
Oh, right. Right. There's a Pixies song that kind of got the... Well, okay, I was watching Fight Club, as one does. And, you know, that song came on at the end, and I was like, that's such a good freaking song. And I was listening to Doolittle and other Pixies songs. And then I was like, yeah, let's do an episode on the mind. And so to offer a little bit of grounding, I'll start with just a couple bullet points, not a lot. So first off, good old Oxford Living Dictionary defines consciousness as, quote, the state of being aware of and responsive to one's surroundings, end quote. They've also talked about a person's awareness or perception of something, or that consciousness is the fact of awareness by the mind of itself and the world. So it's like awareness, right? You know, I think this is really interesting because it puts the brain in a setting. There's this correlative factor. It presents a duality. Some say it's separate. Some say it's not. There's a whole lot of meaty stuff in here. At its core, consciousness is a brain process resulting from neural mechanisms. And whereas the brain is considered to be a physical thing, the mind is often considered to be mental, immaterial, the physical and the non-physical. And the crucial mechanisms for consciousness are representation by patterns of firing in neural groups, also binding of these representations into semantic pointers, and competition among semantic pointers. People have said that the mind is energy and it generates energy through thinking, feeling, and choosing, that it is our aliveness, without which the physical brain and body would be useless. That means we are our mind, and mind in action is how we generate energy in the brain. So we can also think of this as the brain is composed of nerve cells and can be touched, whereas the mind cannot be touched. So yeah, Nick and Mike, what's the last time you regarded your mind or your consciousness?
In like a formal way, like babe. How do you do, you know?
No, I'm thinking like Babe. Remember when the farmer picks up the pig for the first time? Like he really sees Babe, and the narrator says the pig and the farmer regarded each other. So I guess it's an awareness. The last time you were aware of yourself,
of my brain, of
your mind.
Me.
I don't know.
Really, I mean, that's a good question. Yeah.
Makes one think I
Because
titled this better, huh? What word are
um,
we looking at? What are we asking in that question?
yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, if it's like some sort of formal process, then perhaps it's been a while. But I would like to think that I'm aware of my cognition and my thought processes, but maybe I'm not. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a tough question. I don't know.
It is tough. Mike's over there
Uh,
spinning.
yeah, too often. And it's always like going back to Fight Club, like when she's getting on the bus, it's like you were the biggest mistake I ever had, or something like that. Like I
Mhm.
wish I never met you.
Mhm.
Sometimes I wish I didn't meet me. You know, like if it just escape all of that, that'd be
Mhm.
fantastic.
And that's assuming you even know who you are.
Oh,
Well,
I'm
and it's
like on
also
like a 2 out of 10 on most days. I hardly know who I am.
Good to know.
this also linguistically is kind of weird because now we're creating a you and then you. Which you
Mhm.
is you?
Yeah.
The you observing you, is that you or is it not you?
I like to think of it as there's like an ideal version of you and like an
Mm,
actual version of you. And the you observing the you is
right.
the ideal observing the observed.
Okay.
I'm just seeing a whole lot of sheep in my periphery right now because you keep saying you, and I'm thinking of EWE.
Mhm.
Is that how you spell it? That's how you spell
Mhm.
it, right? An ew, a
Yeah.
you. Well, yeah, I mean, and this is a question that's bothered us, and us being humans, for a really long time. Before we had science, before we had neuroscience, before we had symbolic systems and neuroanatomists, we had this pesky issue of consciousness. It was something that you have to remember. The concept of there being no God is relatively new. So prior to that, consciousness, spirit, soul, there was a tendency to want to lump those together, but you did have a lot of philosophers that did recognize this mind body problem. I'm going to read just a quick paragraph on the mind body problem. It says, we are all immediately conscious of our consciousness. Let me start that over again. We are all immediately conscious of our consciousness, that we have thoughts, feelings, desires that are subjective and private to us, that we are actors in the center of our world and have a unique and personal perspective on it. In stark contrast, science is triumphantly objective, open to scrutiny, eschewing the personal and the perspectival. So, how can something as strange as consciousness conceivably exist in the physical world that is being exposed by science? How are mental phenomena explicable in terms of or otherwise related to physical states and events in the body? These questions together form the mind body problem, arguably the thorniest of all philosophical issues. So, what do you think about that?
Hmm. To me, it just sounds like a whole bunch of science people being like, all right, I know that the religious people say that there's a soul and there's like a connection to God or something, but we can't have that as an answer. So we got to find out. we got to throw ourselves into pretzels trying to figure out like what the hell consciousness is, because if we don't find this out, then we're never going to prove our point to the religious folk. You know, like that's all it seems like to me. Because it's like when you were reading that, I was thinking like, man, science really loves to rediscover knowledge in a reframed way, where it's like, more and more we're finding out how like scientific discoveries are just kind of reaffirming the ancient knowledge or sort of conventional wisdoms of the past. So yeah, I think it's kind of funny that they are so perplexed by consciousness because they had to strip away that framework and that religion kind of gave people, what the method in which religion gave people to understand consciousness.
Are you implying that consciousness is equivalent to the soul?
I would assume,
I think
of it.
because they take the mind body connection and they keep out the soul, which is what the religious context is mind, body, and soul. They just take the soul out of it, and then they're like, why doesn't this work? You know.
Well, and I think too, I mean, like mind is such a difficult thing to define. It leaves a lot of opportunity to insert synonyms, you know, from
Mhm.
different people. The mind can be called the soul. Other people would advocate that it's, I mean, this is such a meaty topic. And so we do not need to get so far into it. But Mike, I'm curious what comes to mind for you.
So I'm going to immediately reject, for the sake of conversation, reject the idea that if our brain or mind were so simple, we'd be so simple, we couldn't understand it. That's a quote by somebody once we discovered modern medicine, and it's a shout out to like one of the civilization games, because whenever you unlock a new tech, you unlock a new like great quote, or whenever you unlock anything really, you get a pretty good quote, and that was one of them. Nice. But I would like to think that the soul is a bit more of an essence. Like your consciousness can be damaged through trauma, through misfortune, through a bunch of different things, but it's the vehicle at which you try to arrive at your soul, which is like the eternal truth of who you are. Because like, and you could get into morality and things like that, but if you violate a certain tenet of who you are, a certain like tentpole of who you are, you feel it very deeply. And I see that most in bad relationships, when somebody has to compromise some bad part or some core part of themselves that they couldn't and can no longer continue in the relationship. Otherwise, they would lose a semblance of themselves. And I think that's like the first or most socially acceptable, tangible thing of the soul. But I think a mind gets you towards realizing your soul, and consciousness is sort of the word that we use to describe, I don't know, going down that road in the vehicle of your mind.
So yeah, in a way, consciousness is, you can damage that, but a soul is without form, and it's removed from sort of like this worldly influence, either good or bad.
Well, religion would say that you can damage your soul too.
Yeah, but that's when things get
so thorny.
When things get real, when you've compromised too much, sure. But yes, but without the notion that it doesn't have form. I think in the beginning you think it doesn't have form, but as you become more self-aware and learn about yourself, that soul thing begins to take a form, and you start to get a better understanding of what you can and cannot compromise, and where the pushback begins.
Okay, yeah. Well, okay, and so that's interesting, because that's more of like maybe like an interpersonal example, thinking about consciousness and the mind-body problem and dualism. I think one thing that's really important when thinking about mind and consciousness, mind, body, brain, body, and then this soul that we feel really connected with, or that resonates with us. There goes that word. I like that word. And here it says, in metaphysical terms, I believe it's Descartes, conceived mind as an entirely distinct entity, a mental substance whose essential nature is thinking. Everything else is matter or material substance whose defining characteristic is spatial extension. For example, that's just the filling of physical space, objects, things. Thus, he envisaged two distinct realms, one of the immaterial minds with mental properties such as thinking and feeling, another of material bodies with physical properties such as mass and shape. It was this picture of the relation between mind and matter that was known as substance dualism. And what's interesting to note is that I believe Descartes was like Kierkegaard in that they were Christian philosophers or philosophers of faith. And so they're starting to think about this stuff. They're starting to separate it out, categorize. And they had still this religious, like thinking pattern that they had to adhere to. They didn't want to break from that. They're not saying God is dead. So keep that in mind when thinking about kind of those concepts. And then, which is interesting because the antithesis to that was from Gilbert Ryle, who wrote The Concept of Mind. and that talks about Ghost in the Machine. Have you guys heard of this?
Mhm.
I've heard of Ghost in the Shell.
There is Ghost in the Shell. Very good anime. Did they make a movie of that?
We don't talk about that movie.
I know. That's how I feel about like Eon Flux. I wasn't happy
Oh my
with that
god, I
one.
forgot all about that movie.
Remember
Yeah,
that?
we don't
Charlize
talk about
Theron.
that either. We don't talk about that either.
See, Gen Z doesn't understand the pains that we had to suffer.
Yeah, she didn't get anywhere near the heat for that.
That flew way under the radar. I think it was
Mhm.
like one of those years where like a gang of stuff came out and they just didn't have enough time to talk about it. But
Like Cowboy Bebop.
Mhm.
Sorry.
Mhm.
Better.
You okay there?
Yeah.
Okay. So just really quickly, Ghost in the Machine, it's talking about the immaterial mind or the soul, the ghost, that's somehow living within and pulling all of the levers of the material body. So let me just stop there for a second. Going back to like, when was the last time you thought about your consciousness or you regarded yourself? Do you feel like your body and yourself are the same thing, or do you feel like they're kind of separate and that there's something driving your meat machine, so to speak?
Well,
That sounded dirty. Like that. Apologies. I meant like the whole body.
I don't know. I mean, I guess we've talked about this in philosophy for a very long time, so it would be obvious that most people probably feel like they're a ghost driving a meat puppet.
Thank you. It's much
Mhm.
better to say puppet. All right. Mike, do you ever feel like you're apart from your physical form?
Oh, of course. That deals with temptations and carnal desires, as you so eloquently alluded to earlier.
Thank you. Totally planned.
No, yeah, it's a divide, right? And that's where the hedonist and the stoic in me fight a lot, because the hedonist is just like, just do it, just live your life for pleasure, it'll feel fine. Don't worry about the other things. And then the stoics, like, the greatest form of pleasure is the abstinence of pleasure, being able to say no and not listen to that, being able to have the will to say no. And that gets into the wills and stuff. But yeah, no, there's definitely something where you're driving this machine, even on more routine daily execution when you don't want to do certain work. Like earlier, I had to code something that was a thing I had to code. It just had to get done, but I did not want to do it at all. My body was just like, no, just chill. You relax. It's the time to relax. What are you doing? And I had to force or will myself into that. So that drives daily execution. That ghost can force that machine to do more. I think.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I totally agree. And there's this really great quote from Mr. Gilbert Ryle. He says, "The dogma of the ghost and the machine maintains that there exist both bodies and minds, that there occur physical processes and mental processes, that there are mechanical causes of corporal movements and mental causes of corporeal movements." So it's interesting because it's almost like it's one and the same, but there's also a duality. And I think this is really interesting because I'm going to say that, in my opinion, the dialectical issues that we have as humans, so like yin yang, opposites, Hegelian dialectics, all that stuff, I kind of am starting to be of the mind that that duality is simply some sort of a relic to our brain hemispheres, because as we'll get into in this show, the brain is really freaking fascinating. And since early philosophers, we've understood a lot about the brain. And I don't know, I just feel like this episode, I wanted to kind of explore some of those discoveries.
I think. Go ahead.
Do you think it's necessary from an evolutionary point of view, where these things are kind of, it's implied that they're adversarial, that the ghost is somehow fighting the machine, and sometimes they cooperate, in my mind at least. And if the Hegelian issues that we have, if all of that kind of stems from our brains fighting themselves, is that necessary? Is it a thing that we need for evolution? Because that's true in adversarial AIs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and with the evolution of this mind-body problem, you have entering the Turing test from the 1950s. And one of the more recent things was this philosophical essay on what is it like to be a bat. We can circle back to that because I'm looking at the time and I don't want to stress anybody's minds out. If you're listening to this and you're cooking or chilling out, I think we can kind of skip to the next little bit.
Yeah, before you do, I just wanted
Sure.
to touch base on the issue you talked about with duality. I think that the brain is a diode because that's a product of the duality existing in reality itself. I don't think that it's I think that it's just a product of the fact that most things in reality have a sort of binary. And so we're probably just kind of come to this, point in our evolution where the brain works with two hemispheres. Many things in reality are sort of on that binary 0-1, life, death, light, dark, all of that kind of stuff. So, like the maybe breaking out of that is reaching that sort of next level of reality. And that's probably where you get the sort of Eastern philosophies of Buddhism and Hinduism and stuff.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because going back to the mechanisms of consciousness, a lot of what we are thinking, it's representation by patterns, and it's semantic pointers and competition between pointers. So, yeah, I mean, like there's a lot to be said because when you start getting into consciousness, it's quite easy to say, all right, well, philosophy's kind of gone as far as it can go. Let's push the boundaries of linguistics, psychology, symbolic systems, philosophy, neuroscience, all these different things. And I don't know if looking at those makes it easier or not. I wanted to give it more time to ponder, but then I also wanted to share these ideas while it was fresh. So I'm feeling like we might need a follow-up episode. But let's get into this idea of the internal dialogue. Right? Because, okay, so consciousness will drive desire. I guess the first question is, do you think that comes from you or do you think that comes external to you? It's a little bit like free will and fate if you think about it, but
Desire?
just like impulses, will. Like do you feel like that's coming from you organically or do you feel like you're a product of like experience and influence and history?
Well, I think just like Mike said, right? There's a dueling nature of our own brains. So I think it can be a little bit of both, I think that you have that sort of ideal you and then the base you. And the base you wants the quick impulsive pleasures. The higher you wants the forms.
Yeah, okay. I'd co-sign that. Mike, do you want to sit with that for now or do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both, but I think there's influences along the way from past experiences. For example, just like the simple adage, you can't miss what you never had, right? So that starts to influence, that can influence your base desires, that can even influence your higher self if you allow it. But yeah, no, I co-sign on the notion that it's a bit of both, with a caveat that there's always a place for influence, even if it's just simple observer influence, like you get in like quantum systems.
I love it. You should do an episode on quantum systems. That sounds fancy.
So fancy.
So fancy. Well, speaking of fancy, there's a fancy psychologist named Russell Herrell. He's over at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and he spent a few decades training people to see inside their own minds more clearly in an attempt to learn something about our inner experiences at large. Interestingly, words don't actually seem to feature as heavily in our day-to-day thoughts as many of us think that they do. He said, before I get into some of this stuff, the methodology behind his research, it's I don't know. I mean, so this is from an article in BBC called What Your Inner Voice Says About You. And then I think there was like several other articles where they quote this gentleman. But there's debate about the methodology because it essentially came down to like a timer system and training people on the timer to stop everything and write down what was going on in their mind the moment that the timer went off. And he starts to educate them about like the different kind of types of stuff that might come up, or encourages them to ask questions without trying to give too much influence. So just keep that in mind. But in his years of studying the inner workings of people's minds, Burt has come up with 5 different categories of inner experiences. So first, you have inner speaking, which does come in a variety of forms. You have inner seeing, which could feature images of things that you've seen in real life or imaginary visuals. There's feelings, anger and happiness, sensory awareness, like being aware of the scratchiness of the carpet under your feet. And then there's unsymbolized thinking, which is a bit of a trickier concept to get your head around, but essentially it's a thought that doesn't manifest as words or images, but is undoubtedly present in your mind. Kind of wish he'd given examples for
Like
that.
emotion?
I think it's like complex relational thinking. I mean, unsymbolized thinking, it's unsymbolized. So I guess maybe it's because like some people think of images, some people think of words, some people have feelings, sensory awareness. Unsymbolized thinking, that is
Doesn't
tough.
fall into either category.
So not emotion, not visualization, like subconscious type, like intuition, or is that something else?
Okay, so I'm Googling it. It says the phenomenon is unsymbolized thinking, UT, thinking a particular definite thought without the awareness of that thought's being conveyed in words, images, or any other symbols. Well, that didn't help.
Yeah.
Yeah, it almost sounds like though like an impulse, like the impetus before action sort of thing.
All right, I'm refining the search to include examples.
Like for me, like when I know because I smoke cigarettes, so like it's like addiction could be one of those things where you feel like you want a cigarette but you haven't formalized the idea yet that you want a cigarette. You just know that you're kind of starting to get a craving for nicotine or craving for coffee or craving for anything.
Maybe. Okay, there's this person here that says it is a pure thought and there is nothing except the meaning of the thought present to awareness. For example, I was thinking that there was a strong smell, maybe a gas leak. That doesn't help. This is like, again, this could be a whole exo bit, but it is interesting to me that there is a categorization for unsymbolized thinking.
Yeah, because
I mean,
the
like,
second you got language out of it, you've symbolized it.
right. Right. And then like
Those are just the NPCs.
yeah,
They're just running on code.
I mean, but also like, couldn't you say that if that is pure thought, that's at the crux of our humanity? Because like you can code a computer to have all kinds of symbolized thinking, but unsymbolized thinking, and now I'm looking at an abstract from Russell Herbert himself. And he says, unsymbolized thinking, the experience of an explicit, differentiated thought that does not include the experience of, okay, it's the same thing, frequently occurring, yet little known phenomenon. It's a distinct phenomenon, for example, an incompletely formed inner speech or a vague image, and is one of the 5 most common. It's not
Like-
well defined. I mean, he has 50 pages.
I mean,
there.
that's by definition, it's not defined. So I don't think you're going to find a definition.
That bothers me.
It's like buffer overflow or something, like in computers when if you're managing memory, you can mess up and have like the binary idea of the number 1 fall into the binary idea of the number 9, and then what you actually read is some hodgepodge between the two that's not actually defined at all. So I guess it's like a buffer overflow of the mind when it's like you can't symbolize the actual thought.
I'm feeling
I don't know.
like this could be a whole.
How would you know if you
episode.
thought that way?
Right.
Like you wouldn't. That's what I'm saying. Like it's emotion. Like to me, emotions are those things that you can't really define well. You can say you maybe like you can say I feel a certain way, and that's about it though. But if I ask you to
Name
actually
it.
describe the feeling,
That's
yeah,
a feeling versus.
but sadness to me is not the same as sadness to you. Like if I ask you to accurately define the exact thing you are feeling, you would just be like, "What the fuck? I'm feeling sad." Like you don't know what that means. You'd get
I, f-
angry.
I feel like this is something that's only definable like to the French, you know? It's like in the same category as like je ne sais quoi.
We gotta find some French folk then. Invite them on the
Right.
show for like 5 minutes and then kick them off.
If
Send them.
you are listening to this and you're French or speak French, do comment. Let us know. Well, yeah, and so okay, just to not get too much in the weeds, but you know, so there are people out there that are classifying our inner voices, which I think is pretty interesting.
Hold
Especially
on,
because, like, what is that inner voice? Do you talk to yourself inside your head?
I was
Do
gonna
you have?
ask that. I
Yeah.
was gonna say, does everybody here have an inner voice? Because there's a lot of people that don't.
Yeah, I think about it sometimes. I don't know. I would have to relate it to somebody else's experience and then be like, okay, are we coming to the consensus that that's an inner voice? Because I mean, like, I think things. Is that the same thing? You know, or is it Jiminy Cricket standing on my shoulder telling me not to do something that I shouldn't do? You know, and like so there's different conceptions of what the voice in your head is. So I don't know.
I
Right.
have a very loud inner voice. What about you, Ayla?
My inner voice is weird because it's there, but when I try to pinpoint it, it's not there. So like for example, if I'm having a hard time focusing, I will start narrating out loud because I can't focus. And so I'll be like, okay, we're going to do this. It's going to be awesome. Get your pen, get your book, get your charger. You know, like I'll have to narrate it because that helps discipline me to make sure I'm like doing what I need to do in the moment. Nick's heard me. Probably sound crazy, but you know, a lot of people mutter to themselves. So it's muttering. But so like internally, am I doing that? Am I saying to myself, do this, do that, do that? And it's just that I'm trying to enhance focus when I say it out loud? No, because I'm not doing that in my head. I know what I need to do.
Because thoughts are complex. They're not just like a verbal string of words. You know, it's not like I'm thinking of what I'm thinking about saying right now. You know what I mean? Like,
wait, are you ready? Are you ready for this? Ayla, is that your unsymbolized thought?
I was just going to
There you
say
go.
that. No, I know. I mean, this is why I love this episode and probably why I couldn't name it, because when you really stop and you're like, what and where is my mind? Like, that's a weird thing to just be like, I'm gonna take a moment. What's going on up there? Especially because when you pause to regard your own mind, it's like it goes quiet. At least for me.
No, it doesn't for me. No, I have that experience, Nick, is like I have a very strong internal dialogue for about 4 months of my life. I lost it. Maybe even a little bit longer than that. I just wasn't realizing it, you know, on and off. But there was a time when I didn't have an internal dialogue at all, or I preferred to describe it as a monologue. Because if I describe it as a dialogue, I feel crazy.
Yeah.
But it's that thing of I'm thinking of this thing and I can describe it, and I don't have to externalize it through a voice. Like I feel like with you, Ayla, like when you're like, I need to get my pen. There might be something else happening, but when you verbalize it, you're giving it symbols, but it's still residing in your mind in a non-symbolic form.
Well, and that's the thing is when I have to do that, it's because in my mind, I'm like, oh, I want to Google the news updates on this. Oh, I want to make sure I read this. Oh, I can't forget this. Oh, but then there's this. Oh, what about that? Ow. Like there's like I process
that's your inner
multiple
monologue.
things.
That's your inner voice.
But do you hear it though? Do you hear
That's
it
the
as
thing.
like a voice?
I don't think you can hear it.
Well,
in
like
your
if
head.
I know, but like if I talk about it, I feel
God.
like I can hear it. But when I hear it, I'm not hearing it. Like, how could you hear it? Your ears aren't hearing anything.
You really don't hear anything. Like I the way that I pick up my internal dialogue is the same way. I'll argue with myself in my head too and go back and forth between ideas, but I hear it the same way that I hear myself speaking or I hear you speaking.
Yeah,
But do you?
I
Because when
see.
you really focus on it, like, do you? Because I
Yeah.
used to think I did, and then writing this, I was like, I can't hear myself.
The way that I hear myself piped through these headphones, they might sound a little bit different because of the microphone and the tech,
Mm-hmm.
but it's the same way that I like. Even as you were saying, like, do you really? I was like, yeah, I do, just in my mind. So
Mm.
that's the maybe why I have delays in talking at times is that I just have to go off the initial, like the word that I'm saying. Otherwise, I'll think a whole thought out and never explain it because I hear it in my mind. I'm not going to repeat myself. I don't like repeating myself, but I hear it in my mind. Am I crazy? Is this what this is
I
all
don't-
about?
No,
I-
no, you're definitely not. Nick, what were you gonna say?
I kind of like I feel like I do too, but I can't be sure. I'm sure I do say things in my head. I do think things through a lot, but when I think it's more visual, maybe like higher on the visual scale than the audio scale.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, like I've definitely thought things in my head responding to my own thoughts before. So I guess that's what we're talking about here. But it is
it's
weird to think
very-
about because it's not like in my mind, it's not like I can hear it as clear as I'm speaking right now. It's more of like it's within my thought process. It's kind of like a third person sort of thing where it's like, I don't know, the assessor of my thoughts is looking over all of the stupid thoughts I have. And then
I'm
it's
just
like, no,
thinking-
don't go there. Don't go do that. All right, now we're going to go with this thought here. And we're going to go with that. You know, like, I don't know. It's just a way to disembody it, I guess.
I only get that with memories. When I think of memories, I can like visually abstract myself. Like I don't have any words unless I said something dumb, which I hold on to forever apparently.
Don't we all?
Like I see myself in a visual space, and even can like as like a free camera can move around different angles. I'm pretty decent at remembering environments, so I can move myself in a certain way. So is that kind of like what you're talking about, like that visual representation of every thought that you have?
Yeah, and most of my thought processes aren't in sort of like experiential. It's all like simulation running. So the way I guess this is just the way people who visually think probably is that like if I have a thought, I'm visualizing the thought instead of like thinking it. I guess
So you
that's the
don't
best
you
way.
don't see you don't see the word. So like
No, I don't see
if
the
you're-
words. I see the vision first and then the words. But like if I'm thinking about something, it's always like I am projecting out into some other space, the head space, I guess. It's almost like yeah, I don't know. It's weird.
Well,
Like a
I
movie
know
It's a
that-
weird thing to like try to define.
Well, I know when Nick does the show notes for his episodes, he has to do that Venn diagram where you have like the idea and you draw out different ideas. So I could see in that regard kind of like there's multiple ideas at once and maybe you're visualizing it as like thought blocks rather than thoughts or something
Yeah,
like
see,
that.
I don't even know how to articulate
What's
Yeah.
between
Well,
thought
okay.
blocks and thoughts.
thought blocks and thought Legos and
So-
It's really weird when you just stop and think about this stuff.
So Nick is a very visual thinker, but Ayla, when you're like, I have to go get a pen, are you in your mind? Are you repeating to yourself, I have to go get my pen, or do you see a pen in your mind that you have to get? Like the same way if you lose your keys. If you lost your keys, you have to find it in the house. You're like, where are my keys? And you're trying to remember the last place you put them.
God, you know that is
Do you
weird.
see the keys, or do you see the word keys and you're
Ah.
just looking for the keys?
Okay, I'm gonna close my eyes and mention something like
burger.
burger. I saw a burger. Okay.
All right.
I didn't hear a burger. I saw a burger. So that's a clue.
Well, you also
So
heard
if
a
I
burger.
say- So
Because
if
I said
Crap.
it.
That wasn't a
If
good
I-
example.
If I say your dog Indy, do you think of the dog
I see
itself?
her little face. Yeah.
So visual.
You said
it's
it
more visual.
again. Well, okay. So to share one thing that might help us get into this internal dialogue, because whether you think in pictures, whether you think in words, then the question comes like, what is informing those thoughts? So 2015, there was a study. A psychologist at the John Paul II Catholic University of Lublin, Poland. He asked his students to describe the different kinds of inner voices that they conversed with, and they came up with a list of 4 common internal interlocutors. I don't know if that's spelled right or if that's a word I don't know, but
Interlopers. What?
it's not interlopers. It's
Interlocutors.
interlocutors. Yeah, it's a weird word. But so of those, you have the faithful friend, the ambivalent parent, the proud rival, and the helpless child. That if you were to categorize your inner voices, it would fall into one of those 4. Each voice might pop up in different situations. An ambivalent parent type voice might offer caring criticism, but a proud rival type is more likely to be focused on success rather than offering support. We might adopt these different roles to help ourselves get through situations like a tough test or sports game or something like that.
So archetypes.
Mhm.
These are like
Right.
Jungian archetypes.
Mhm.
Right. I was going to say the same thing. It's like, yeah, these archetypes are like, well, I guess the question is, are the archetypes external, or are they something that arose with us and the archetypes just give them a name?
I think they're human truths, right? Which would make
Seems
them,
to be.
yeah, like a form thing.
It's though, right? It's your internal interacting with the collective external. What do you think of what do you think a helpful rival?
Helpful
Or,
friend, faithful friend. What was the other? What's the rival one?
Faithful friend, proud rival,
Proud
helpless child,
Proud rival.
ambivalent parent.
Rivals are interesting. They're
Focused on
I would argue they're
success.
friends. Well, focused on success, sure, but they're friends in a not a pathological way, but never. And this is outside the scope of the conversation. But no, I think they're the archetypes. They're the way that you internalize the external world and how you, how you manage it and how you go and talk to those others, I guess.
Yeah, no, and the science supports that. People believe that there's been enough research to show that inner speech plays a really important role in self-regulation of behavior, problem solving, critical thinking, reasoning, and future thinking. But there's still plenty of questions left to answer too, like whether the use of inner speech varies across cultures. So that gets into myth, right? Like if your mythology is totally different, how does that inform your internal thinking and structures? And whether different kinds of inner experiences correlate with different types of personality types. Also referred to as internal dialogue, the voice inside your head, an inner voice. Your internal monologue is the result of certain brain mechanisms that cause you to, quote, hear yourself talk in your head without actually speaking and forming sounds. So that's just a little bit about the voice in your head. Now, do you think that consciousness and the voice in your head are the same thing? Or do you think they're different?
I think one's a component of the other. The voice in your head is a component to the overall consciousness. Consciousness is it's all the perception and taking, it's that filtering, it's the balance checking with the internal voice if you take it as an authority, or the rebellion against it if you don't see it as such. So it's a component of it. The inner voice could also be your conscious, in the more like religious form of the word, not like consciousness. So you can rebel against it, or you can choose to take things differently, which informs your greater consciousness. So yeah, I think it's a component.
Feels right, right?
Yeah, because I don't know if you can consider your in totality of consciousness just the little inner monologue that you have. I think it's about awareness. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's about a lot of other things too. So
And I think we
Yeah.
should decide if it's a monologue or a dialogue. Is it a dialogue according to the research?
I don't talk to myself in my head.
Oh, geez. So I'm the only one that's there.
Well, I think
All right.
it is a dialogue because you have to think that the faithful friend and the ambivalent parent can both coexist in a situation.
I don't think you want more than one person in there.
Dude, there's like a Congress in here, all right? There's a republic happening. There's a representative republic going down in here. There's people voting on people to represent different parts of the subconscious and conscious and all come together and vote. Every now
But
and
I
then it's a totalitarian thing. I don't ask. Yeah. Now I'm concerned.
Yeah, now I'm concerned. Mike's just gonna get more and more concerned as we go through.
It's gonna get more and more neurotic.
Right. Well, no, okay, so this is good. Let's put a pin in that for just a moment. Give our brains a break. I'm gonna tell a story. And this is really like the reason I brought this show. And so if you're still listening with us, you are going to enjoy some wonderful mind desserts in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so there's a TED Talk. It's by Jill Bolt Taylor. She was let me just read this. I don't want to botch anything. So there's growing evidence that inner speech is important for self-reflection also. Harvard-trained neuroanatomist Jill Bolt Taylor recovered from a stroke and wrote about it in a book called My Stroke of Insight. It's about what it was like to experience a silent mind without inner speech for several weeks. She's quoted as saying, "What a daunting task it was to simply sit there in the center of my silent mind, trying to remember, who am I? What am I doing?" So this happened on December 10th, 1996. She had a massive stroke in the left hemisphere of her brain. And, she's a brain scientist, so she talks about observing it as it's happening. And she observed her mind deteriorate to the point that she could not walk, talk, read, write, or recall any of her life, all within about 4 hours. She alternated between the euphoria of the intuitive and kinesthetic right brain, in which she felt a sense of complete well-being and peace, and the logical sequential left brain, which recognized that she was having a stroke and it enabled her to seek help before she was completely lost. It actually took her 8 years to recover. Now, what she said of the right hemisphere is that the right hemisphere is all about the here and the right now. It thinks in pictures. It learns kinesthetically through the movement of our body. Information enters our systems, our body, and it tells us what the present moment feels like, what it smells like. Our right hemisphere connects us to our environment and to others. And in this moment, we are completely whole and beautiful. It governs our attention to the world we are in. The left hemisphere, a little more linear, a little more methodical. It holds the language center. It's all about the past. It's all about the future. It's designed to take a collage of the present moment, pick out the details, categorize the information, associate it with anything and everything we've learned, and projects out to the future possibilities, using negative bias of the past to protect itself in the future. It's the ongoing brain chatter. It's the voice that also says, I am, that I'm separate from others and my environment, so that I can remember to go get groceries so that I don't die, so that I'm fed. It allows me to think ahead about what actions will be in my best interest. So just right there, that's kind of left and right hemisphere. Any questions before I continue? Any thoughts?
Wouldn't it be great if we didn't have to eat? Like if we could just skip that whole thing and just live. Wouldn't that be awesome?
Nick said that once, and I was like, no, I love food. But then it's like, it's kind of a pain in the ass sometimes.
I love food too, trust. And I love sleep. But if I could skip both of them and just continue on being, I'd be quite happy.
Really? You wouldn't miss the dream world of sleep?
No, my dreams can be very cruel. Like since I've regained dream recall, my dreams can be quite cruel, and I'm okay with it. But if I could just skip over the whole process, that'd be fantastic. I think those are some design flaws in if there's a grand architect, a grand designer, we could cut those out and design something better. I feel like.
I see. Nick?
What?
What? Any
What?
thoughts about left and right hemispheres? Just hearing what you
No,
heard.
I mean, it's just honestly, it just reminds me of the sort of the duality talk again. The binary seems baked into the cake of existence. There's this sort of dual human, the sort of the hedonic, and then the more mercurial or etheric. And yeah, it just seems like the sort of the, you know, like the sun and the moon. It's this pattern that happens over and over again, and it's really beautiful, to be honest. I like it, the fact that we are able to set ourselves out of reality as humans because we kind of push this consciousness thing, and we use it as a tool to sort of sit on high and observe the rest of the world, but we're still victim to the same basic reality, that we have this sort of duality going on, even just within ourselves.
Well, what?
May I interject? I'm sorry.
Go for it.
Do you, both of you, question, but Nick first, because he's responding.
Uh-oh. Sounds like it's going to be explosive.
Yeah, a little bit.
Wow.
Prepare thyself.
Yeah. Is our mind, is the left and right hemisphere more of a hot war, a cold war, or a what's the term that gets so used now? A
culture war.
A cooperative competition.
Oh, culture war. That's a good question. I mean, I think that there's multiple states in which the dyad can sort of be in. They can be in conflict when it's necessary. Conflict is good for growth. It's also good to learn lessons with. They can be in harmony when necessary. I think there's a lot of, especially within the Eastern philosophy, it's much more about the balance and the harmony. I think they kind of overlook the importance of the conflict sometimes. And so I could see where there would be modalities in which the hemispheres could have a hot war or a cold war or peace or, you know, whatever, because it would just be case by case. It's whatever the hemispheres need in order to continue on, you know, like, and sometimes people don't have the ability to sort of, you know, make the peace agreement or whatever. But hopefully a healthy mind would be able to switch between, you know, a little bit of conflict and peace.
I have a response to that. Ayla, what do you think?
I think that through experience and trauma and conditioning, they can be in a hot war. But I think that the goal is to achieve more of like an integrated, embodied mind. That seems to be what the literature is supporting right now, which is that you have top down and that you would have top down integration, which means that you're not ruled by your, you know, baser instincts and impulses, but that you would also have an integrated left and right brain so that you can fully integrate with your surroundings, actuate your desires, and process feedback from your experiences in a healthy way that lets you continue your objectives. I'm trying to think like really, you know, like without adjectives, but that's kind of like what I'm thinking about it. But as we'll see in this story, it's going to blow your mind.
Yeah, let's keep going.
You sure? What were you going to say?
I mean, I can hold it for a future episode, or I can say it in one. Like, we eventually have to end somewhere. I just don't know where the rebuttal and the rebuttal to the rebuttal ends. I don't know how that. I can hold it for a later episode as we explore more on this thing, and I feel like it deserves more of a exploration rather than me trying to throw out a one-liner and then shuffle people off stage.
Ooh. We'll hang on to it because maybe it'll fit in after this. So this I'm just going to read a couple of excerpts from her talk where she describes the internal witnessing that she experienced during her stroke. It gave me chills when I heard her speak. So I'm really excited to share this. So she says, I got up and I jumped onto my cardio glider, which is a full body, full exercise machine. And I'm jamming away on this thing and I'm realizing that my hands look like primitive claws grasping onto the bar. And I thought that's very peculiar. And I looked down at my body and I thought, whoa, I'm a weird looking thing. And it was as though my consciousness had shifted away from my normal perception of reality, where I'm the person on the machine having the experience, to some esoteric space where I'm witnessing myself having this experience. And then I realized that I can no longer define the boundaries of my body. I can't define where I begin and where I end because the atoms and the molecules of my arm blended with the atoms and molecules of the wall. And all I could detect was this energy. Energy, energy, energy. She kept repeating it in her talk. And I'm asking myself, what is wrong with me? What is going on? And in that moment, my left hemisphere brain chatter went totally silent, just like someone shook or took a remote control and pushed the mute button. Total silence. And at first, I was shocked to find myself inside of a silent mind. But then I was immediately captivated by the magnificence of the energy around me. And because I could no longer identify the boundaries of my body, I felt enormous and expansive. I felt at one with all the energy that was, and it was beautiful there. Then all of a sudden, my left hemisphere comes back online and it says to me, hey, we've got a problem. We've got to get some help. And I'm going, I've got a problem. So it's like, okay, I've got a problem. But then I immediately drifted right back out into the consciousness. And I affectionately refer to this space as La La Land because it was beautiful there. Imagine what it would be like to be totally disconnected from your brain chatter that connects you to the external world. And you'll have to watch the TED Talk to really appreciate it because she goes on and on about this experience and like going back and forth. But what she adds is that she had tried to call a phone number to get help. And she remembers her left brain had kicked in and she's going through this Rolodex looking for the right person. She saw it, but then her right side kicked in. And so she had to hold it. And she saw squiggles on the card and she saw squiggles on the phone, which these are numbers. And so she's trying to match the squiggles in her Rolodex to the squiggles on the keypad. And it's interesting because like when she was going back and forth, she had to hold the finger on the card because the like time would shift and there would be no way for her to know where she was in dialing. Like it took her an hour just to dial. And then she said she finally got somebody on the phone and she hears, whoa, 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 whoa. Now in her mind, she's thinking to herself, oh my God, I can't hear this person. Well, let me tell them what's going on with me. And then when she spoke, it came out, whoa, 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 whoa. It wasn't making any sense. The language is gone. She said she felt her energy lift and her spirit surrender. Either she would be saved or she would transition. She said, I said goodbye to my life. And now her mind is suspended between the pain of sensory perception. She couldn't identify the body of her body in space, so she felt expansive and enormous. Her spirit soared like a great giant whale. She said she thought she found nirvana. But then she thought, how can I squeeze the enormousness of myself back inside this body? Then she's like, but I'm alive. And I have to stay here. And so she said that she ended up going back and forth so many times and wondered to herself, what would it be like to choose to step to the right of your left hemisphere to feel nirvana? She said that we are the life power of the universe with manual dexterity and two cognitive minds. She said a single individual, separate solid forms, distinguishable from the flow versus connected to the larger universe. And I just thought that was freaking incredible. I mean, to have an experience like that, you know, she's a freaking neuroanatomist, brain researcher, and having this experience where the left part of her brain would shut down and then her right brain takes over and then her left brain would kick in and that would take over. I'm just curious. What do you make of that?
Well, it sounds kind of like what they did with lobotomies, right? Where they took out the inner monologue of people.
Oh God, is that what they did?
Yeah, they tap you on the left. I believe it's the left hemisphere. They tap the prefrontal cortex here, and it scrambles the brain so that you don't have that sort of inner monologue going on anymore, and it makes people very docile and passive and kind of euphoric. Funny enough, there's a story about that, right? I think it happened like people volunteered to do it in like the 30s, like thousands of people volunteered to have lobotomies. They went to a park and they just put up a pop-up lobotomy shop, and
What?
thousands of people just voluntarily got lobotomized. Yeah.
That's crazy because that says more about those people who what were they trying to silence? You know, was their inner monologue so
But
bad?
it was all the rage. It
Oh,
was like
no.
it was like Lucky Strikes, man. It was like nothing better than a lobotomy to to unwind after a day. That's the way they thought of it, seriously. But that's all to say, like I think that she kind of had an ego death, almost a sort of a complete ego death, right?
Mhm.
Same sort of thing that psychedelics kind of simulate. To me, what she's explaining sounds like she's dying. And she's going into that sort of fifth dimensional space, or the right brain, and the left brain is the one trying to fight and stay alive. And it's a good thing the left brain did try to fight and stay alive, because she probably could have slipped into a brain dead state where she was in some sort of weird simulation in her mind.
Oh man, yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah, but fascinating.
I find it so like those third perspective memories. I've always held like looking at myself like, yeah, that's me, but she lost that. So it sounds like the right brain expands and then the left side of the brain contracts. And I find that highly fascinating.
Right.
Like throughout that expansion, and as Nick was saying, there's like this sense of euphoria, or that you're one with the universe. But the thing that wants you to be more logical, to be more rationally based, then will contract that down. I'm just trying to take it to the form of DNA, which ends up more symbolically representing the twin snakes, right? How they expand and then contract at one point. So it's like there's this theme within consciousness that wants to expand and expands as wide as it can, given that you're not insane or lobotomized or completely gone, where you can then contract back within this notion of the self, of you, of I am. And I find that really, really fascinating. And that a stroke is something that caused this kind of gas and brake system to work, at least within her tellings of the story. And maybe our own consciousness is just that whole system, but with speed limits. Like you can only expand so far before you have to retract back into yourself. Maybe because of the ego or whatever, but that left brain side of you starts to scream at you to come back to you. And then that means that they're both needed. It goes back to that whole duality thing.
Right, which gets back to the physical nature of our brains being inherent in our consciousness and forcing a duality that might not exist. Because if you get into, where is it? Oh, I think it's the bat perspective. There's this philosophical essay on what is it like to be a bat. It gets into this idea of subjective reality, and how much can you base on a subjective experience?
Yeah, the false one, the false duality,
But then,
there's conflict within harmony, sort of
yeah,
thing.
yeah, and like what Nick was saying about like mushrooms and stuff, there's a lot of research right now where they're talking about using mushrooms and ketamine as treatments for anxiety and depression. One thing I've noticed across a lot of those is that they they keep reiterating, but we don't know how it works. And I'm thinking to myself, well, could it be that there's some sort of restoration of a connection to source? Or, you know what I
Connections
mean? Or it
between the brain.
dampens, or maybe it just dampens the left hemisphere and, yeah, like reinforces that connectivity so that you have that brain that can access both at the same time. That can be
Mhm.
really stressed out, but at the same time can see the bigger picture and feel like, okay, this is but a small thing.
I wonder if visual thinkers are more right brain than left brain as far as processing thoughts. Because I know when I've been on hallucinogenics, my right brain, like I see far more visually. It makes my left brain like sort of like calm down. You're just on drugs. Bring it back in, which of course destroys the whole effect. But that's usually how it goes. So I ponder. Yeah, it has to be right because visualization is a right brain thing.
Well, visualization's actually really weird because as I was pouring through some of the research, there was an article that was like the left and right brain thinking they have it all wrong, which it wasn't kind of like one of those clickbaity headlines because he's like, well, yeah, there are two hemispheres, but, and like started kind of nitpicking at that generalization. But what I think is interesting about vision and visualization is that, like, first of all, our eyeballs, like, do you know how our eyes see? So each eyeball split it in half. So there's a right side of the eye and a left side of the eye. The right side of each eye sends information to one side of the brain, and the left side of each eye sends information to the other side of the brain. You also have your occipital lobes, which connect to the eyes, and those are like connected to, I forget which function of the brain, but like anyway, the long story is that like the crisscrossing of our eyeballs, that shouldn't really have happened, but it did. And some scientists aren't really sure like why we still have the crisscrossed eyes, or they've made theories that like it's a throwback to some evolutionary thing. But
Did what, do chimps not have it?
I forget. I was gonna include it and then I like didn't go back to the link, but part 2. We'll put a pin on that. But I just think visualization is kind of interesting because you have a sensor for visual input, and then we have this internal visualizer that, like, what is that? Because if you were to
a
remove the
hologram.
visual input, yeah, I guess it is. It is. It would be that.
And we're just little projectors.
Well, your brain has to filter some
Well,
stuff out.
oh yeah. Well, and it's funny because like as she's talking, what I thought was really interesting was that expansiveness, where she said that she really couldn't feel the differentiation of herself and like all the energy around her. And then it was like, how do I cram this back into my body? And I've talked about this before, when I was in the ER and they gave me that ketamine, I had that very much experience of being like one with everything and then struggling to get back inside my body. And it's very hard to describe, but once you've experienced it, it's like you can't really let it go because it's like it revealed something. But then reading this, I'm like, I don't know. I mean, because again, consciousness is one of those things where like this woman started her research because her brothers got schizophrenia. And her interest was why is that with schizophrenia and non-schizophrenia, if you don't have schizophrenia, you can observe your world and engage with it, and you can align with the outside world to achieve your goals. Whereas with schizophrenia, the world that you're experiencing doesn't align, and so you can't access your goals as readily because there's all these layers. I mean, there's a lot more to it, but you know, it was just interesting to hear her talking about, I guess, the way that the brain colors your perception of reality.
No, I feel like I think it's with schizophrenia, you you can't you can't filter out certain signals. You can't. So like the outside world, quote unquote, your goals are aligning. You're aligning with other people's internal goals. So they can filter the world to a certain level. The idea is that you can also filter that same world to a certain level. But I think it's just all the raw inputs you get from schizophrenia that you can't filter anything out. So anything can start to uh, change your perception, which then affects the way that other people filter their world, and they can't interact with you anymore. There's a film I've been trying to dig up, and I can't remember. It was like an indie film about a father who was fighting to get his daughter back. And he was
Kyle
schizophrenic.
XY. No, that's not
Yeah,
it.
no. He was trying to get his daughter back, but it was from his
Taken?
point of view, not taken.
No.
Not Liam Neeson. This is an indie film, so maybe made for like 20 grand at the most. Really like low budget esque film, but maybe part of the Criterion Collection. But anyways, it did a good job at showcasing the inputs that a schizophrenic would have. That they just can't filter things out, so everything started to affect how the person was, from like
Hmm.
the bird chirping outside to the car honking to the radio, even when it was on, even if it was off, or even if it was on some station that usually your thoughts would get in the way of listening to.
Mhm.
You know, you go in the autopilot, that autopilot's impossible. And it did all the borderline a horror film because it does such a good job at showcasing this. But yeah, I think it's that filtering, and whenever you have a stroke, or you, like she did, or you have some sort of brain injury, it becomes harder to realign your internal processing with all the other world's internal processing to sync up. I think this is also
Hmm.
true with like autism and maybe even people that are higher in IQ. They just filter the world differently than the majority of people do, because they're in a minority of the distribution. So then they have a harder time connecting to the rest of the world.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think you know, like it's there's more awareness now of sensory processing issues, of people who have a really hard time with smells, get really overwhelmed with sounds, or have other types of, you know, reactions and experiences, and trying to kind of help them navigate this world that's not set up for them, you know, like it's just hard. And it's interesting to just think about the word that you used, which was perception. You know, you have consciousness, you have reality. Consciousness is supposed to be a reaction and observation of reality, but perception, for somehow it gives me this like flawed feeling. And so, just to share a little bit about the corpus callosum that Nick had mentioned. So, most mammalian brains, they're divided into a left and a right hemisphere. But in humans and all other placental mammals, the left and the right hemispheres communicate via a central structure called the corpus callosum. It's just a bunch of fibers that connect the two brains and let them talk to one another. If it's injured, the signal transmission from one hemisphere to the other is impaired and can lead to serious coordination problems or ataxia. The person lacks control or coordination of voluntary movement, such as walking and picking up objects. You'll also see people with corpus callosum injuries have this thing called alien hand syndrome. And I think there's actually a movie. Wasn't there a movie about a guy that had a idle hand? Yeah.
It was the devil, but yeah.
Oh. Well,
Same
Well,
thing.
idle hands are the devil's work.
That's right.
no, I need to see that movie again because I remember it being kind of funny, maybe. I don't know.
It's very
I'll-
90s.
I like it. You know, there's a lot of like 90s movies that flew under the radar, but that were actually like, they're still good today.
Yeah, like
FYI.
Monkey Bone.
What?
Monkey Bone. I'm sorry. Continue.
No.
I was thinking of Brendan Fraser.
Okay. Oh, what is it? Frasier? I remember that show.
Brendan Fraser. No, Brandon Fraser. He did a movie called Monkey Bone, but the theme is like idle hands are the devil's work or the devil
Hollywood loved Brendan Fraser, didn't they?
for a
Until they
minute.
didn't.
He just disappeared.
No reason
Um,
why.
Mm-mm. Well, and so with alien hand syndrome, it involves uncontrollable hand or limb movement. It occurs when damage is done to the corpus callosum. There's this one woman, she had a surgery to control her epilepsy. And what was weird is that the hand would slap her or even try to undo her blouse after the surgery. Sometimes her left leg would go rogue and force her to walk in circles, which is like so messed up. Speaking about how she discovered the condition after the operation, she explained, Dr. O'Connor said, Karen, what are you doing? Your hand's undressing you. Until he said that,
Nice.
I had no idea my left hand was opening up the buttons of my shirt.
Sure you didn't.
I know, right?
Bow,
Like,
Easy.
chicka, bow,
just trying
wow,
to bag
chicka,
herself a
chicka,
surgeon.
bow.
Yeah.
But then she said, so I started rebuttoning with the right hand, and as soon as I stopped, the left hand started unbuttoning it again. So he put emergency call, was like, you gotta get her right away. And just, oh yeah, you don't have to hear about the rest of that, but it was just interesting because there's a lot of stories of
Why
corpus
not?
callosum
No, I'm just
injuries.
kidding.
I'm not entirely sure it'll make sense. She said, I'd light a cigarette, balance it on an ashtray, and then my left hand would reach forward and stub it out. It would take things out of my handbag, and I wouldn't realize, so I would walk away. I lost a lot of things before I realized what was going on.
And that's so funny because then that makes me think like, okay, so idle hands was like this. That's kind of a trope in storytelling, like the hand from hell. And this just makes me wonder if there's any sort of medical merit to all of that in the folklore. Like maybe these people had corpus callosum injuries and their left hand is trying to kill them in their sleep, like trying to choke them.
Right.
But it's weird that it has a different personality than she does. She's like
Right.
the left hand doesn't smoke.
Isn't the
Right, but it likes to undress itself.
isn't the left hand controlled by the right brain and the right hand's controlled by the left brain?
I don't know. I mean, that was the
Next how your eyes
conventional wisdom.
cross. I don't know. But no, yeah, that it makes you wonder like if we're like two things fighting with ourselves at all times.
Mm-hmm. It's very true.
I'm looking this up. I remember taking let's see. The brain's right hemisphere controls the left side of the body. So you're right. Yeah, it's that crisscrossing.
My neuropsych teacher was amazing. Let me tell you.
Yeah, I remember taking like a pre-med course, and it was like brain behavior and something else. It was a trip though, because like it was just
It was biopsych, but focused on the brain nerve. Yeah, but no. It was a good class, and would highly recommend if you're in the LA area going to West LA Community College to take biopsychology. You only have to take one. You only have to take intro to psych, and then you can take bio, and then you find out all this fun stuff about your brain.
Oh yeah, brains are a trip. Do you want me to share some other odd brain diagnoses?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's a thing. All right, there's a thing called Todd syndrome. It's also known as Alice in Wonderland syndrome. It leaves sufferers with migraines that can distort the perception of size, distance, or time. Robert Williams, an app designer from Sydney, Australia, found that he was enduring the head spinning sensations when under times of extreme stress. Quote, I could be chilling out on my bed and the wall in front is about 5 meters away and suddenly, zoom, it's there in front of my face, end quote. It's not that I see the wall moving towards me. It's just right there in a flash. And he added, okay, I gave up on the quotes, but he added, you could be gazing at an object like a painting on your living room wall, and then suddenly it pops right up in your face. It feels like the room is caving in on you. And even if your brain is saying, no, we've been here before, this isn't real, your perception is that this is so real and it's the strangest feeling.
That would suck. I guess you can never drive.
Probably not. I mean, might think my depth perception is bad.
Wait, he was going through a migraine, right? Was he under the effects of a migraine and then this happened, or did it just happen randomly?
So this is a condition normally begins in childhood, often linked to migraines, but it can also be linked to other conditions like epilepsy and viral infections.
So it just happens. He doesn't have to be going. A migraine is not a necessary condition for
Mm-mm.
the wall just to pop. I mean, I would
Yeah.
still like to experience it at least once just to see what it was like.
But it's weird though, because I'm thinking to myself, like, what part of the brain is stealing your depth? I mean, I guess you look at like
Wherever the spatial awareness portion is.
yeah, I was gonna say, like, if you look at those eye brain teasers, what is it? It's like the blue
Where there's
dress.
Where there's like a
The
boat all of a sudden, and like you find the pattern within like the static noise of the picture thing.
oh, well, those were pretty cool. But I'm actually thinking about
Magic
like
eye.
Magic Eye.
That's
Oh,
what they were called, yeah.
oh, I love that. I remember being so upset as a kid that like I couldn't see it for a long time. It was hard for me to like see what everybody else saw.
I
and was
can't do them on computers, but I can do them on books. It's
interesting.
really, yeah. Something about computers fucks up the magic in the Magic Eye.
Yeah. See that? I mean, it just reminds me of Morax. I want to see the sailboat, damn it! Standing there all day, still can't see the sailboat.
Right. Well, as far as problems go, I would much rather that than have walking corpse syndrome, also known as Cotard syndrome. You guys heard of this? It's a terrifying.
What'd you call me?
Yeah, right.
It's a terrifying condition that leaves sufferers fearing they are dead or have organs, blood, or body parts missing. So it was first discovered in 1788, and the mental illness is a form of delusional psychosis. There's a teenager from Alabama who said she spent 3 years of her life convinced that she was dead due to the condition. She said, my parents had just divorced and I didn't cope with it well. But one day I was sitting in English class and I had this really weird sensation that I was dead and I couldn't shake it. As I walked home, I thought about visiting a graveyard just to be close to others who were like me, dead. But there were none nearby, so I went straight back to my house and tried to sleep it off. Withdrawing from her pals, she eventually sought help from a therapist and realized it was a condition others had suffered from. Get this. She added that watching Disney films gave her a warm and fuzzy feeling and made her realize that she must, in fact, be alive. The Little Mermaid, Aladdin, Sleeping Beauty, Bambi, I watched them all. I asked my boyfriend, how can I be dead when Disney makes me feel this good? I don't know what's worse, having corpse syndrome or like being like saved by Disney, which, you know, I mean,
there might be some deeper psychological traumas going on there, but
those that's true. Right? Those Renaissance Disney films though did do a lot. After maybe to watch like the most recent Mulan or something, and then we might
go back to feeling dead.
Yeah.
Oh man, but I will say Sleeping Beauty was well done. They hired an artist who like art directed the whole thing, which is why it's a stunning movie if you watch it again. And I have Disney
ripped
Plus,
off.
so I can't
all they did was they took the cutting room floor animations from Snow White.
So I don't.
But the background was different, no?
Yeah. But the cells
outside of the
man,
there are a lot of movies. If you watch Citizen Kane, they had if you look at the picnic scene, there's pterodactyls flying in the background because they shot it on the same set as Lost World, Journey to the Center of the Planet, whatever, one of those like movies from the 20s where there's like dinosaurs and they went into the middle of the planet. I forget what exactly it is called. But
Journey to the Center of the Earth.
Yeah, I'm trusting you here. I don't know. And 94% confident that you're correct.
Not 95.67%? I mean, come on. If we're going to get 10, no, just kidding.
No, I'm trying to be a scientist, so I'm trying to go outside the 5% range of confidence here to give me some leeway.
All right.
No,
all right.
There's pterodactyls and shit flying in the background, which is hilarious when you watch Citizen Kane again and see that. But that was a common filming thing.
Recycled scenes.
Yeah, keep things cheap, you know.
Mhm.
The producers are all
True.
fucking happy.
There you go.
But I don't know what I would rather have. That like Cotard
Cotard or Cotard, yeah.
syndrome or phantom limb syndrome. Because I hear phantom limb syndrome is hell. Where like
True.
where you would feel a pain in your arm, like in your elbow, but your elbow's not there. Your arm's gone. And
Yeah.
so you can't even like you would go to reach to like grab your elbow, but it's not even there.
You know what's interesting is that there were studies that said patients would get relief if there was a like you would put a mirror, and
Mhm.
so the visual feedback is that the arm is there because there's a mirror, and that somehow that interrupted the pain process of phantom limb, which is interesting.
Yeah, there's the guy that does that magic trick, right? I think it's on Netflix, but he does like this experiment where he sits a person down at a desk, and then there's a partition that's on one side of them that they put their left hand over to, so that you can't see the arm, and then they put a fake arm right in front of the person, and they smash the fake arm with a hammer, and the person screams.
Yeah.
But it's just the brain, like it can't fucking tell. It's like if
It
the
can't.
Our brain's
perception,
Yeah.
hacked.
so easily hacked.
That's how adult films work. Your brain believes that it's you there.
Right.
Oh,
Mhm.
the more you know. Well, there's one more little syndrome. It's called foreign accent syndrome, which has left many a hospital nurse stunned over the years.
Madonna.
What happened to Madonna?
Yeah, she got British for some reason.
Green Day.
That's exactly what happens.
Yeah, Green
Patients
Day.
would wake up from
Green
a
Day on
coma and they'd be in a completely different accent, which is crazy to me. Like, because it would be like completely unrelated to like their history.
These aren't sympathetic accents. These are just
They're just accents out of somewhere. But I think it's interesting to go from these weird things that our brain does, which are obviously weird because it's like that shouldn't function that way. But then to think about it in terms of cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. You guys heard of this?
Yes.
So it's interesting because like I'll just read the list. So within CBT, there's a couple of different challenges that you can enter, like if you have depression or if you have anxiety or if you have panic attacks, you can start to use cognitive behavioral therapy to interrupt the lies that your brain's basically telling yourself. That could include identifying cognitive distortions that lead to negative thoughts, challenging core beliefs, so negative generalized judgments about yourself or the world. You would want to challenge that and be like, is it that negative? Is it that bad? Socratic questions to challenge irrational thoughts, decatastrophizing, breaking the hold of worst case scenarios, and gratitude, rewiring the brain to focus more on positive aspects, which build up resistance and is a pretty good antidote to the thing that our left brain wants to do, which is to pick apart every single moment and categorize it as good, bad, so that it can protect its future self. So I thought that was kind of cool, just to look at how psychology is taking our consciousness, our internal voice, our left hemisphere, and finding ways to make it work differently, make it work for ourselves, and make it feel a little bit more at homeostasis.
Yeah, I like to, because this was in other civilizations, this would be the job of the shaman, or maybe the
Or
priest.
shaman.
The shaman.
I heard it pronounced like that once, and there was this moment where I was like, have I been saying it wrong all this time?
It's pronounced shaman.
Oh, shit.
Well, trust, I've heard some words pronounced in different ways. The one that comes to mind is soldering. Apparently, there's a big difference between soldering and soldering. Anyways,
soldering. Yeah.
There's one you're doing a really vile action. The other one you're just trying to burn some flux onto a an electrical board, but Americans have a very particular way of saying things.
Mm.
Hmm.
But with shaman, right? Like the psychologist, I think is just the Western shaman class. Like they're like that rightness, that fixing of your brain. In other traditions, shamans would use drugs, would use rituals and things like that to get your brain back into that homeostasis, which from a cellular biological level, all of our cells want to reach. That's why we have osmosis and reverse osmosis. It's just kind of like trying to balance, get the right amount of salt and water into your cells and stuff. So that makes sense why cognitive behavioral therapy would work so hard to get that brain balanced whenever we run into issues um, of imbalance. It's just you get into the Watchman paradox of who watches the Watchman,
Hmm.
who does the psychologist perform therapy on themselves? Do they find other psychologists? Does the shaman find other shaman? Some traditions they go out on their own and wander the desert for God knows how many days, and maybe in other ones they find other shaman. But I think of them. I think of psychologists as that same thing, and I think of
Mhm.
cognitive CBT as a ritualistic tool to use to make your brain reach back to reach that sync that we talked
Mhm.
about in our CRA episodes, once
Mm.
per
Ah.
episode.
Mhm.
No, I like it. Well, and it's funny because I remember maybe like my first Navajo ceremony as like a young adult, right? So you're not a kid running around careless and playing in the dirt or whatever. Like you're starting to be an adult. You're thinking about things, you're feeling things. And I remember there was this long prayer and lots of songs, and I had asked my cousin, I think, to help me like translate kind of like what was going on during this conversation, and what one prayer was. It's still pretty new. And she's like, "Oh, well, it's a happiness prayer." And it was really funny because in my mind, I had all these visions of like, oh, he's praying for success and health and good thinking and money and wealth and security or whatever. I mean, I don't remember what I was thinking at what my hopes and dreams were then, but they were like complicated. And for this medicine man to just be like, nope, it's just a happiness prayer. Like, just, but I think that it was really like a harmonizing prayer, and simple, right hemisphere, not this like chattery left dominant side. And I thought that was like kind of a really interesting lesson for me, thinking of shamans or shamans, or what did you call them, Nick?
Shamans.
Shamans. That's like Tarjay.
Yeah.
I didn't go to Target. I went to Tarjay.
Yeah. That's when you want to church it up some bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and have you guys
Yeah.
heard of monochrome Mary? Oh, go ahead, sir.
Monochrome narratives.
Monochrome Mary.
Mary, no, I haven't. And then what was the thing I wanted to say? Something about shamans in our Western
Shaman.
culture, and this goes back to there's an episode I want to do on Western culture versus Eastern culture, and the worry that we as Western culture fetishize Eastern culture within a Western culture lens that has nothing to do with the conversation we're having. So
I
I'm just
like
gonna
it though.
throw that away. But
As a teaser for those of you listening. It's good stuff.
yeah, go back to monochrome Mary, monochrome.
Oh yeah. So I kind of wanted to wrap or start to wrap it up a little bit with this sort of this other philosophical idea along the line of the brain body, and it was monochrome Mary. So Mary, from the moment of her birth, was confined in a black and white room where she was never exposed to anything that was not black, white, or shades of gray. And her education may have been a bit unusual, but she wasn't neglected. She read reading books No color books, of course. They were all black and white. She watched lectures on black and white television, and
Oh, I'm
eventually
sorry.
she
Is this
became a
a
great
thought
scientist.
is this
A
a
little
thought
bit.
experiment?
A
Or
little bit.
this better be a thought experiment because someone
It
should go
is.
to prison for child abuse.
No, yeah, it's a thought
Okay,
experiment.
good. Okay, continue.
So basically, she learned literally everything that there was to know and could be known about the physical nature of the world, about us and our environment. And then the day came when she was able to leave that room. And it was a shock. She saw colors for the first time. She learned what it was like to see red and blue and yellow. So even though she knew every physical fact about color, there were still things about color that she didn't know. It had to be experienced. And I mention that because when it comes to consciousness, we're experiencing our own subjective minds all the time. But when you start to look at the research out there and you read the stories, the understanding we have of our mind, it gets really murky. And I think to that, that there's a reason why we resonate so much with artistic ventures that don't cling to hard description. That is to say, we like the things that kind of push our understanding and force us to experience the world, which is not definable, which is those thoughts that have no anchor points. And the brain itself colors everything that we do. There's a quote in Hamlet, there is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. There's another quote, I think it's Paradise Lost, where it's the mind is a powerful thing. It can make a heaven of hell and a hell of heaven. And I mean, yeah, I wanted to just talk about the mind. Again, I don't know what to call this episode. The mind is cool. That's all I got.
Have you ever seen so my brain's kind of forking into two different points, and I want to synthesize them into one, so I'm sorry if I trail off in thought. Have you ever seen people hear sound for the first time that we just found, or even more recently, UC Irvine made a synthetic eyeball that was able to recover or help people recover from macular degeneration, which is something that my family suffers from, which probably I'll suffer from. One of my greatest fears as a programmer is going blind. That or losing my hands. Both of them are is unfathomable to me. But that experience of seeing color for the first time is equivalent to hearing sound for the first time or getting your eyesight back. Mm-hmm. And those things are just the mind is crazy because it will build your reality to your limitations, but the second that you're able to
expand that,
yes, exactly, like the lady, like the doctor with the stroke, expand past that, you get this euphoric one with all sensation. And I wonder if seeing color for the first time is one of those things where you feel like you're one with the world.
Yeah, just watch it on YouTube. They have all those colorblind people that use the Chrome glasses because they have sunglasses now that can correct color blindness. And it's always fun to go watch a handful of those videos because they're sweet. It's
so much joy.
People who've never seen color in the real vividness of color, and brings them to tears. Each and every one cries immediately.
Dude, no shit.
Immediately. Yeah,
I gotta get my pops some. My pops is colorblind.
Oh yeah, you can buy them. They're super affordable now. I think they're like $100.
Oh my
nice.
God!
I'll film it and then we can put it on the show. For the
that sounds good. Yeah, I mean they're sweet videos because and especially because color blindness affects men more than women. No. So it's usually older men who have spent their whole life without seeing color, and it's really nice to see them put them on. It's just then they just go fucking crazy and just start sobbing, because they're overwhelmed. They're overwhelmed by it.
Of course.
All. Yeah.
That must be a thing to see. So with colorblind, with respect to that, have you ever I've been driving in sunny conditions a lot, and the green lights will turn gray You ever had that?
Yeah, certain. It depends. Yeah, I mean, like my eyesight's not that great as it is, but I think I get more of like, yeah, if there's a particular glare, I could see where that would happen for sure.
Okay. Good. I'm just making sure I'm not going
Yeah.
You wanna
Well, if
know
you
what's
ever do, you'll have
interesting?
sunglasses to fix that. So
That's
Oh, yeah,
true.
right. And I'll sob for a bit. I get to cry. It's a
yeah,
good thing.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, and so I have astigmatism, and it's interesting because like at night, all the lights at night are like, like they're
Do
very
you get
bright,
those
and they have those.
halos?
Yeah, exactly.
I get
I
those.
didn't know that like other people don't see that until like I think I saw it on Google. Like there was like either a news article or it was on YouTube, and it was like with astigmatism, and then it was like without, and I was like, what? Well, what? What? And like I felt so betrayed, right? Because like I just assumed that's what everybody sees, and I was like, wait, nobody sees that, and like it's this really weird perception shift. And if you want to learn more about it, there's a great essay, "What is it like to be a bat?" And it kind of gets at this, where it's like bats can use sonar for directionality, and that's the subjective experience of that bat. But so it makes you wonder, like, well, the sonar, that's not something that a human experiences, and yet it exists, just like ultraviolet that butterflies can see. It exists, but we can't experience it. And I don't know exactly what that means, but I think when it comes to like the brain body, or what is it, the mind body problem, right? Again, that was talking about like, well, what's real? Is it outside that's real and we're perceiving it, or wait, no, I'm sorry. If the mind is real, how is it connected to the brain? If the brain is, are the brain and the mind both real, which is intangible and tangible? And I'm okay. I have to
Can we
think a minute.
drift for a bit?
Yes,
Can I
sure.
let us drift for a little bit? So I've had acute sensory sensitivity for a long time. Like it's probably undiagnosed autism, but sensory sensitivity for a very long time since I was a child. It's one of the reasons why I listen to music really loud is to drain out the internal dialogue and then the external, because I can hear conversations that happen in like rooms over and respond to them, and it makes me like I'm kind of happy that I experience a world like I've realized that it's probably not something a lot of people experience because I've heard others respond to me of like, you've heard that, or like I said that in a whisper, you like that sort of thing, and I almost don't, in a weird way, there you get a comfort like this Mary, like I wonder if there's a comfort yeah, I guess that's why you would cry, right? Because you just don't know about color. You don't know about that. So you get comfortable to the reality. And the way that your brain constructs that reality, it can become not a prison, maybe like a golden, what do they call it? Like when it's a happy prison, like when
Gilded cage.
a gilded cage, yes. And I wonder if there's certain, what they would call mental illnesses, what the ancient Greeks would call eccentricities, that build a gilded cage. And when you try to get back to reality or back to like the average state, if it brings you to tears, not out of happiness or overwhelmingness, but from being underwhelmed. And like it's the way that the mind can construct that reality, that perceived reality, not actual reality, right? That your consciousness works the world, I find highly interesting.
No, it's so true. I mean, like, and also too, just like how your intangible experience and will can literally change your brain. Like cab drivers in New York, if they did like MRIs of their brains, the spatial recognition centers or whatever are like way overdeveloped compared to people who don't drive for a living.
You want to know something funny?
Yes.
Same thing for cabbies in London.
Really?
And yeah, and cops in London. So when I was learning how to drive, I picked up training videos from there and training videos from the California Highway Patrol. And their neurological studies, both of them find out that the things that map out the city or your like frontal cortex, the thing that does spatial reasoning, is
Mhm.
overdeveloped versus anybody else.
So cool. Brains are a trip, and the byproduct of brains or consciousness, definitely a trip.
Yeah, but then are we just
Mm.
prisoners to our conscious?
I mean, that gets back to all the questions we start. This is going to be one of those episodes that I might have to listen to a couple of times just to like hear all three of our voices back and be like, I mean, because it's not something, I mean, I don't know. I feel like with the research that we're doing, we might get a little bit closer to understanding it. But to be determined, I think, for
I
sure.
know. I think I know. So I've been dashing pretty consistently now for over a year, and within a very confined area of LA. And there's certain streets that I get, certain addresses that I'll get, where I can visualize the place in my brain, where I don't even need to turn on the GPS, and I can get there
Nice.
in the most efficient path and the most efficient time. And I know that if there's accidents or road rage blockades, I know the alternate routes to take. I did not have that when I started my dashing career, if you want to call it that, or campaign, whatever, however you want to put it into cognitive and symbolic thinking.
Have you noticed that your coding is now like structurally more robust because you have this like engorged spatial part of your brain that's like super
Oh,
strong?
that's a good question. I think I know now the multiple paths to get to a. I see it in the interesting. I see it in the same way that I see getting to a spatial location. I see the solution. Try to. I see the solution first, and then I now build the ways to get to that solution. In the same way that when I'm driving, I see the place first, and then I break down all the roadways to that place from where I'm at, or the restaurant that I'm going to.
You know, I kind of want you to become like a super successful tech billionaire, if only so as to motivate other people to start driving around a lot more to enhance their spatial awareness and thereby their coding to just follow in your
Hey,
footsteps.
who's to say I'm not?
Who's
Maybe
to
I'm a
say you're not?
secret billionaire.
Oh, so fancy.
No, there's something going back to like local news, not to, I guess, derail our wrap up. But dashing, if you work for a DoorDash, I guess you have to make one delivery a month. And there's an executive who was getting paid 400 grand a year who was angry that they had to make one delivery. From a craftsman's point of view, if you're not willing to use the product you create in any sort of fashion when you're in that craft, there is, I feel like there's a fundamental flaw with your reasoning.
Yeah, not even
like,
for quality control. Come on, man.
Yeah, it's just one. It's just
Yeah.
it takes like 20 minutes
That's
at
the bare
most.
minimum.
Yeah,
Yeah.
seriously.
Yeah.
Boo. I say boo to that. Or shame.
But it's
Where's my
but
bell?
there I hope, but this is something from the brain too. Like you get the reinforcement that you're at a certain status, and your consciousness gets taken to that status, right? You're an executive. You don't do the lower things anymore. You're so much better than that. And that's why you get paid the big bucks, right? You're higher thinking. But in my mind, if you get paid the big bucks, then you should be able to have the skills to do the lowest task job and all the way up to whatever your level is. That's why they pay you the big bucks, right? Because you can cover everything in between. And I don't know if that's like a supervisor point of view or like that thing, but it's something that cognitive dissonance that your brain can do, where you complain is doing something as simple as going to a restaurant, saying somebody's name, picking the food, driving to somebody's house and putting it on their step, and then leaving.
Yeah. Well, if you don't think a restaurant owner hasn't scrubbed a toilet, then like, and that's the thing. It's like, in order to be really into your business, you have to start at the basics. you know, the very ground level. You know, you should, just like the CEO should know everybody in the mailroom, you know, like you should know those people. You should know who they are, and, you know, like, and what their work is, because it's an intimate detail of knowing. And it goes back to like the experiential awareness that Ayla was talking about versus the theoretical awareness. So they can go to their MBA schools and be like, in theory, I know how our dashers pick up their orders, so I don't really need to do it myself. But in that actual experiential awareness, you might learn something that you would have never considered. That could have amplified the business 10 times, just because maybe you found a glitch that was that bugged the shit out of you, that, you know, all the people were telling you about that you ignored. But once you actually had to experience it, you're like, oh yeah, we need to fix this.
Yeah. Or even like someone like me didn't notice something, right? Because I just pick up. But you having the MBA, you having that higher business mind, noticed that shortcoming. Like, oh, I can optimize that.
Right.
From your managerial point of view, and then fix the thing. Yeah, no, you're 100% correct. And then, like, from an entrepreneurial point of view, there's this guidance that I've been following recently of like, if you can't do the job, then you shouldn't hire for the job. Yeah. Because you don't know then what that job entails.
Right. Yep.
Very true. Well, and you know, just to help wrap things up, I was just thinking as you guys were talking, you know, consciousness is a mystery, and then all of a sudden throw in there mass consciousness.
Yeah, mass unconsciousness.
That too.
Yeah.
Oh man,
many mysteries.
Break. I feel like you have to overload people. Like a mass you have to like get that bulb to run hot and then have it break. And then maybe then you get consciousness on a mass level.
Oh, you said bulb. I actually took a snapshot. I didn't have time to look this up, but for another article, apparently scientists discover biophotons in the brain that could hint that our consciousness is directly linked to light.
Oh, you want to know something scary?
Man, there goes science again, trying to rediscover things that people have been saying for thousands of years. Jesus Christ!
When we were talking about alien disclosure, and you were mocking Avi Loeb because he was still on and on about that rock.
Yeah.
Have we?
I love it.
Have we talked about Wi-Fi on this podcast?
What about the Wi-Fi?
No, Li-Fi.
Oh, Li-Fi. No, we haven't.
We have to talk about
light fed fidelity. Hell yeah.
Yeah. We have to talk. So there's ways that you can imprint information on photons and then send them from one place to another. The only bad thing about it is that if you put it like a piece of paper in between, then you break the whole
yeah.
Which makes
ruin the data.
Yeah. But if our brain processes light and puts information on it, that makes sense. But what can be now, you can start to like hack eyeballs. Like if you encode light, I mean, our eyes just pick up light, right? But if you encode that light in a certain way, then you can hide things that other people can see, which then begs the question about schizophrenics and if there's actually cameras above their head that they see, or if it's that starts. Anyways, yeah, never mind. There's a lot of questions. Yeah.
Gets
There's
real
like
weird
10 episodes we just have to do right now. Well, thank you so much for indulging me on this really weird brain discussion. Really appreciate it, and appreciate you and the listeners, because I think, it's fascinating stuff.
Very fascinating. Yeah, thanks, Ayla. That was a good one. Intriguing. Something that I think we can all go and think about for a little bit, and maybe think to yourself, how do I know I'm thinking, and where am I thinking from, and who is it thinking? Is it me or is it me?
How am I thinking?
How am I thinking? Yeah.
Yeah, and talk to yourself. Don't be afraid to
talk to yourself. Yeah, talk to yourself is totally fine. There's nothing unhealthy about that. So, don't be ashamed if you talk to yourself. But yeah, thanks, Ayla. We appreciate it. And thank you to all of you lovely listeners out there. We very much appreciate you. Please consider giving us a thumbs up, like this video, subscribe to our channel. We would very much appreciate it. We're on YouTube and Facebook, and we're on Verbal for your audio, and we're on Odyssey and Rumble now. So we're expanding out there. But if you want to, just find us on just by searching for Exofathom. We're there for everything. And we appreciate you. Yeah, Ayla, did you have anything?
Yeah, I was going to say we should mention the other shows, part of our network.
Yes,
I have been loving Screen Time Continuum. Y'all should love to watch that too. It's a good brain reset, in my opinion.
It's a fun one. We do that with Dijon and Keelan, and soon to be Mike, who will be taking over Wednesdays with us on Screen Time Continuum, where we review movies and talk shit about stuff that we really have no credentials to talk about, but we do it anyways, because that's the fun part of watching movies, right? And then we also have Keelan's If Numbers Could Talk. He's going to give you statistics and data and figures on a myriad of different topics. He focuses a lot on sports, but I know that he's been working to get the wider statistical world out there as well. So stay tuned for that. That's If Numbers Could Talk. And Dijon the Mustard, who is our co-host on Screen Time Continuum, has his own Twitch channel called Strawberries and Coffee. And you could go check him out. He's streaming video games Tuesday nights and Thursday nights around 10 p.m. And he also has a YouTube channel where he puts all of his streams. So you can catch them all there on YouTube at Strawberries and Coffee. But yeah, thank you so much, you Cognonauts, for listening tonight. You stay out there, and we'll see you next Monday at 8 p.m. on the next Exofathom. Good night.
Peace.
Later.